A month on from the referendum, a warning the economy has had a dramatic deterioration. Manufacturing orders are down, the service industry has slowed, exports are up, but fears of recession grow.
The crime and violence that today afflicts our nation will soon, and I mean very soon, come to an end.
Also this lunchtime, bold claims from Donald Trump as he accepts the Republican nomination for president. A UK medical first. This double hand transplant patient speaks of his joy. And an ice cream, a dog and a 3-year-old boy. The royals celebrate Prince George's birthday with the world.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Ranveer Singh.
Good afternoon. New figures show a sharp decline in business activity since the UK voted to leave the EU. It could be the first sign of a rough economic ride ahead as the country digests the impact of last month's referendum. Today, the new Chancellor, Philip Hammond, insisted he had the right tools to ride out any downturn, but hinted he may reverse many of the plans put in place by his predecessor, George Osborne, as soon as this autumn. Our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Shipp, has all the details.
On a Friday morning 4 weeks ago, Britain woke up and discovered we were on our way out of the European Union. And since that result, which shook the economic and political world alike, something has been happening to the economy. Government data for the weeks since Brexit will not be available for some time. But another accurate measurement of the economy showed output fell, new orders fell, and confidence in the service sector slumped to a near 8-year low. The report was compiled by this economist, and the results he saw were worse than expected.
It's the service sector, by far the largest part of the economy, where we saw the real worrying trend. And that was in terms of how growth changed between June and July. That was the biggest turnaround that we've seen in the history of this survey, which is nearly 2 decades.
The survey, the Purchasing Managers Index, is a monthly survey of 400 businesses about their performance, orders and recruitment. It gives an overall number based on their responses. A score of more than 50 suggests the economy is expanding. Indeed, last month, before the impact of the Brexit vote, it was at 52.4. But the number goes under 50, it means the economy is shrinking. And for July, it was 47.7. It is an early, albeit unwelcome, warning for the new Chancellor, who today is in Beijing, reaching out to the country which will soon have the world's biggest economy. But it could mean he will have to ditch George Osborne's austerity targets.
I've made it clear that at the autumn statement we will have an opportunity, if necessary, on the basis of the data that's then available, to provide further support to the economy in the announcements we make then.
These figures are not official, but history shows they have been very accurate, and that makes them an accurate warning about the impact of Brexit.
Well, Chris, we talk about the impact, and this looks like a short, sharp shock, but what does it mean in the long term?
Well, look, I think we should be clear. This is a reflection of what is happening in the economy at the moment. And I know the Bank of England has a lot of faith in these figures because they've been shown to be accurate before, and they come so far ahead of the official figures for this period, which aren't due out until October time. But it isn't an indication, it is not a prediction that we're heading for a recession. Now, in order to get a recession, you need 2 consecutive quarters of contraction. This rather suggests the economy might be contracting a bit at the moment, but then again, it could be a short, sharp shock. The political crisis at least is over. We've got a new Prime Minister, we've got a new Chancellor. Philip Hammond was saying he could do things in his autumn statement and extend borrowing, etc. But it does show, as we were warned, that Brexit has had an impact in the short term.
Chris Shipp in Westminster, thank you. Donald Trump has formally accepted the Republican Party's presidential nomination, saying he will make America great again. In a 75-minute speech, he pledged to crack down on immigration, rebuild the military and scrap Obama's health care. He said Americanism, not globalism, will be their credo. Our Washington correspondent Robert Moore was at the convention in Cleveland.
Our next president, Donald J. Trump.
His daughter Ivanka made the introduction. This has already been one of the most unexpected journeys in American politics. A year ago, it was unimaginable Donald Trump would be saying these words.
I humbly and gratefully accept your nomination for the presidency of the United States.
He portrayed a country on the abyss and an opponent who has damaged everything she has touched.
This is the legacy of Hillary Clinton. Death, destruction, terrorism, and weakness. In this race for the White House, I am the law and order candidate.
As a billionaire developer, Trump has long paid off politicians.
Nobody knows the system better than me.
Money and influence, corrupting everything.
Which is why I alone can fix it.
A lone protester was drowned out by chance, but still made her message known before a TV audience of tens of millions. Whether you think Trump's protectionist and isolationist message is the answer,
Our plan will put America first.
or whether you think he is a fraud, Trump has triumphed because he claims to speak for the ignored and the voiceless.
I am your voice. And we will make America great again.
This was maverick, vintage, populist Trump at his best. But the question remains here. Are there still enough angry, frustrated and fearful voters to take him all the way to the White House?
We will find out the answer to that question over the next 3 months. But as always, the one man who appears to have not the slightest doubt is Trump himself. Robert Moore, ITV News, Cleveland.
Britain's first double hand transplant has been successfully carried out at a hospital in Leeds. The recipient, Chris King, lost all his fingers when they were crushed by a machine at work 3 years ago. Now he's made medical history and has been describing what it means to him. Sangeeta Kandola reports.
It was like the hands were made to measure. They absolutely fit. It's better than any lottery win because you feel whole again.
Chris King is still getting used to his new hands. 3 years ago, after an accident at work using a metal pressing machine, he lost all his fingers. But now he's got them back. The first person in Britain to have a double hand transplant.
They really are my hands. My blood's going through them. My tendons are attached. My nerves. And they're mine.
The complex operation at Leeds General Infirmary took 8 surgeons and a team of volunteers 12 hours to complete after a long search for a donor.
Not only do we have to match the hands immunologically in the same way we have to match the kidneys and livers, but they also have to look appropriate because the hands are on view the whole time. And so, in a way, that makes the job of finding the correct donor even harder.
The more I do it, I get more feeling.
It's early days, but the 57-year-old says he's already had some movement in his new hands and can't wait to put them into action.
I'm looking forward to being able to ride my bike properly and use my petrol mower. I have a self-propelled mower.
But most of all, he says he can't wait to do up his own shirts and hold a beer bottle in his hands. Sangeeta Kandola, ITV News.
The International Olympic Committee says a further 45 athletes have tested positive for banned substances after a second set of samples provided at the London and Beijing Olympics were reanalysed. Doping allegations, of course, continue to overshadow the run-up to the Rio Games. Our reporter Amy Lewis is at the Olympic Park, where many athletes will complete their warm-up to the Games. So, Amy, just talk us through these revelations today.
Well, it is just 2 weeks until the Olympics kick off in Rio, but barely a day passes without allegations being made about doping in athletics. And today is no different. The latest comes from the IOC, and it's in terms of reanalysis of samples taken from the last 2 games, Beijing and here in London. And the breakdown is as follows. It shows that there were, from the Beijing Games, 30 positive tests. From London, there were 15, and the total of reanalysis tests that come back as positive is 98 from the IOC. Now, the IOC aren't naming any athletes in connection to this, but it is important to point out that this is all based on evidence. It's not being done at random, which is why the percentage is high. And there's going to be more testing between now and also during and after the Games. So whilst this is overshadowing the build-up, it's also going to overshadow the Games when they're happening themselves.
And you've been speaking to Mo Farah, who's competing there. What does he have to say about it?
Well, this is the last time he's going to be competing before Rio in the London Anniversary Games tonight and tomorrow. And you'll remember that last year there were allegations made about his coach. And today, earlier on, when I spoke to him, he talked about the treatment that he received at the time and also said that he had sympathy for the clean Russian athletes who won't be able to compete in Rio.
It's not a nice thing. It's the same for you guys. Last year you put me through hell, which I haven't done anything. I do feel sorry for them, for athletes who haven't done anything across the line, as you know. But at the same time, as a country, as a nation, it's them people, are responsible of it.
Well, the IOC are meeting on Sunday. We'll learn more then about what's going to happen to the rest of the Russian athletes in terms of whether or not they're going to be banned from Rio.
Amy, thank you. The shocking conditions for staff at Sports Direct have been revealed in a damning report, with MPs comparing the company to a Victorian workhouse. It highlights the extremely disturbing working practices across the UK, with claims that staff who are not being paid the national minimum wage are being penalised for taking breaks or sickness. Others have even been promised permanent contracts in exchange for sexual favours. Paul Davies reports.
Sports Direct is a massive success story, a company that's made its controversial owners fortune. But MPs say the treatment of its workers belongs to another age.
We found those working conditions to be absolutely deplorable, something akin to a Victorian workhouse rather than a high street in Britain in 2016.
Sports Direct's owner, Mike Ashley, recently appeared before the MPs to answer a series of complaints many he agreed were justified.
Do you accept that the company was effectively paying workers below the minimum wage?
On that specific point, for that specific bit of time, yes.
But it wasn't just pay. An undercover investigation at the company's Shirebrook warehouse exposed disturbing treatment of employees, a bullying culture. Workers afraid to take time off when they were sick, salary docked for being just a minute late, employees forced to wait at the end of their shifts until they'd been searched before being allowed to leave. Mike Ashley said he hadn't known about all that. Unlikely, the business committee concludes.
He's a very hands-on owner when it comes to the company. The culture has grown up around him. He is Sports Direct in everybody's eyes.
MPs say it's not just in the Sports Direct warehouse that employees are badly treated, but in stores nationwide. Confirmed by Jack, who used to work for the retail giant in the northwest of England.
It's one thing to sort of lift boxes for hours and hours, but it's a different thing to do that lifting while people are treating you like you're scum.
Sports Direct today confirmed its policy to treat employees with dignity and respect and said it would be studying the MP's report very closely. Paul Davies, ITV News.
Still to come. The new research that links booze with 7 separate cancers, and Big Boy George, the Prince, poses for the cameras as he celebrates his 3rd birthday. But first, two men who worked at a school run by the Christian Brotherhood in Scotland have been found guilty of historical child abuse. John Farrell and Paul Kelly have been convicted of 11 counts of sexual offences involving 6 victims, as Peter Smith explains.
St Ninian's in Fife was a Christian Brotherhood school run by a religious order within the Catholic Church. But in this school photograph, the faces of the children cannot be shown because of the abuse so many suffered here. This child was one of them. 3 decades on, he's now a husband, a father of 2, and he told me what went on in the care of those Christian brothers.
They would have their favourites, or we would nickname them pets, that they would take to their rooms at night time, and that's where they would stay until the next morning.
So this was children being taken into these rooms and they were spending the night with the teachers?
Yeah.
He was just 11 when they first came for him.
I was petrified, I was scared. There was no point in shouting or screaming because nobody would hear you. And if they did hear you, they would know what was going on, so screaming was pointless.
There are 2 faces from that photograph that can now be shown. John Farrell and Paul Kelly. Today they became the first Christian brothers to be convicted in Scotland, guilty of 11 counts of abuse against 6 children in their care during the 1970s and 80s. But this follows thousands of similar abuse revelations at Brotherhood schools around the world. And former pupils like David Sharp told me the crimes at St Ninian's go far wider than just 2 men. He's campaigned outside Brotherhood offices around Britain for recognition that he was taken out of the school in Fife to Ireland and passed around for abuse at parties by men who have never been prosecuted.
Until these people, the perpetrators, are caught, justice is done, and the Christian Brothers and the Catholic Church come out and show a meaningful apology, then I can't get on with my life.
No one from the Christian Brotherhood has apologised, and a spokesperson has refused my request for an interview. Farrell and Kelly stole innocence from children and left the deepest scars. They bragged to their victims that no one would listen to them against men of God. But finally, the survivors of abuse at St Ninian's are being heard. Peter Smith, ITV News, Glasgow.
A new study suggests alcohol causes at least 7 forms of cancer, and drinking it in even moderation puts you at risk. A link to liver cancer has long been established, but now researchers in New Zealand have also suggested a direct link to cancers of the mouth and throat, larynx, esophagus, colon, bowel and breast. They estimate it caused about 500,000 cancer deaths in 2012 alone. Well, joining me now is Susanna Brown, who is a Science Programme Manager for the World Cancer Research Fund. I have to say, this took me by surprise. I mean, alcohol has been under scrutiny, under investigation and research for decades. Why has this just come to light now?
This actually isn't new research, but what this paper does is it collates and reviews all the latest evidence, including data from the World Cancer Research Fund, and discusses the link between alcohol consumption and cancer risk.
But it will shock people, won't it, that it's directly linked to all those cancers, which we know about liver cancer. We haven't never thought about those others, have we?
Of course. We do know that people are very familiar with the link between alcohol consumption and liver cancer. Around 80% of people in a recent survey are aware of this link. But when you ask them about links between other cancers, and particularly breast cancer, only 18% are aware of the link.
And so what should we do? I mean, you accept this research, I'm assuming you think it's right. What does drinking in moderation mean? And what would you like to see happen?
What this paper shows is that there is no threshold for which you can drink at, which means there's no safe level you can consume alcohol up to.
So complete abstention is what you'd like?
And not be confident that you will reduce your risk of, not increase your risk of cancer. We do see that there is a gradient response, so we see the greatest risk in the heaviest drinkers, and the people who drink less have a lower increased risk.
I suppose in a way that's not new, but I suppose you would like to see people be more aware of the links and make a considered choice.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you very much, Susanna Brown. 2 members of 1960s pop group The Tremolos have been acquitted of indecently assaulting a 15-year-old girl after a gig almost 50 years ago. Leonard Chip Hawkes and Richard Westwood were due to stand trial next year over allegations they assaulted the teenager in 1968. The government has been told it should reconsider its strategy on fighting extremism because it risks making the situation worse. The Joint Committee on Human Rights urged ministers to tread carefully when trying to define extremism as it risks undermining relations with Muslim communities. The company behind a possible new nuclear power plant at Hinkley Point have announced they will make a decision next week. French energy giant EDF are expected to give the plant in Somerset the go-ahead. And finally, Prince George is celebrating his 3rd birthday today, and to mark the occasion, Kensington Palace has released 4 new photographs of him. The family dog Lupo makes an appearance. Here, the Prince offers him some ice cream at the family home in Norfolk. The Prince and his sister are rarely photographed, thanks in part to their parents' decision to bring them up away from the limelight. So let's speak to Royal Historian Kate Williams. And do you think, Kate, that this is a sort of strategic nod from them that we have to give you something, but stay away otherwise?
I do think that's quite right, Ranveer. The big problem that they have is that essentially they want their children to have a very normal, ordinary lifestyle, but these children are not ordinary. Prince George will one day be the king, and for many people, both official journalists and many unofficial journalists, from internet journalists right through to the average person with a camera phone, a photo of Prince George is worth a huge amount of money. So what they're trying to do is put out these official but intimate photos and saying, we'll give you these photos, but please don't follow him. They talked a lot last year about how he'd been followed in playgrounds. Even children have been used to lure him to places. But it's a very difficult tightrope that they have to walk.
And we heard recently, didn't we, that his aunt is getting married soon, and one would expect he'd play a central role. So that will be something they'll have to manage, I guess.
Yes, there's been excited talk, of course, of Prince George being a page boy and Princess Charlotte, who recently has turned 1, as being the little bridesmaid. And who knows what is going to happen. But certainly the difficulty is that a very normal thing like being a bridesmaid at your aunt's wedding suddenly would become a paparazzi favourite, because the idea that a picture of Princess Charlotte as a bridesmaid would sell millions of magazines across the world. And this is, I think, the problem, that when William was a teenager, there was privacy for him when he was at university. That simply can't happen for Prince George. For a child growing up in the media age, it's very hard to create privacy for him.
Kate Williams, thank you so much for joining us. And they are lovely pictures, we have to say that. He is a cutie. OK, thank you. That's it for the Lunchtime News. I'll be back alongside James Mates with the ITV Evening News at 6:30. The news where you are follows the national weather, but from everybody here at Lunchtime, goodbye and enjoy your afternoon.